When I was young, my grandfather used to tell me ghost stories before bed, but none haunted me more than the one about Ridgefield Farm. I'm nearly 40 now, but I still avoid beef, and I never ever look a cow in the eyes. This happened to Grandpa when he was around my age, sometime in the 1950s. Ridgefield was a small rural town in Pennsylvania, surrounded by forest and farmland. Everyone lived simply, and most had large families to help tend to the land. The more kids a family had, the more help they had for planting, harvesting, and livestock care. Life was about labor and survival. The McGrath family owned one of the smallest farms. It was just widowed Mr. Ezra McGrath and his only son, Nathan. But what they lacked in manpower, they made up for with their prized work animal, a massive auburn ox named Rosie. Rosie was no ordinary beast. She was fiercely loyal, powerful, and smart. She plowed not only Ezra's fields but also those of half the township. In return, Ezra received sacks of feed, homebrewed liquor, or even a few rabbits to skin for stew. Rosie never once resisted work. Whether it was old Ezra yelling or some teenage farmhand tugging at her reins, she obeyed without protest. She'd drop her broad head and plow rows straighter than any machine. But Rosie was also a rare breed. Female oxen of her kind were expected to breed once mature. Year after year, Ezra fed her better grains and waited in hope, but Rosie never showed signs of pregnancy. Frustrated, Ezra began resenting her. One evening, while tossing hay into her trough, he lashed her with his belt for no reason. She didn't react, just backed up and quietly chewed, her deep brown eyes glistening under the flickering lantern light. But then one spring, Rosie finally swelled with pregnancy. Ezra was beside himself with joy. The whole town waited with anticipation, hoping for a strong bull calf. When the day came, Rosie gave birth to a sleek, energetic calf that Nathan named Bramble. But Bramble wasn't like his mother. He was wild, defiant, dangerous even. By the time he was 3 months old, Bramble had escaped the pasture multiple times and stomped through neighbors' flower beds and vegetable plots. Ezra's reputation started to suffer. He lashed out, not at Bramble but at Rosie. She was tethered helplessly in her stall, and each time her calf caused trouble, she bore the punishment. Bramble, sensing his mother's cries, would always return. Ezra was livid. "No one's gonna pay a cent for a beast like that," he yelled. He was determined to tame Bramble or turn him into meat before long. Ezra devised a brutal solution. When Bramble was about 6 months old, he brought in some neighboring men to help pierce the calf's nose with an iron ring, an old ranching trick to control unruly bulls. The procedure was archaic, and the searing iron rod smoked in the cold air. Bramble screamed in terror, thrashing wildly as 4 grown men struggled to hold him down. Suddenly, Bramble broke free. The calf barreled across the muddy yard, eyes bloodshot, foam flying from his mouth. He circled once, then turned, looked straight at Rosie, and let out a roar unlike any the men had ever heard. Then, without hesitation, Bramble rammed his head into the old granite water trough. The sound cracked like thunder. Blood spattered the snow. His young body collapsed in a heap, twitching once before falling still. The calf, the golden ticket Ezra bragged about, lay broken and dead in the dirt. Ezra stood frozen. The townsfolk who had come to help turned pale. No one spoke. Rosie stared at her dead calf, her eyes no longer soft brown but glowing faintly red. People stepped away instinctively. Ezra lost all control. Rage twisted his face. He grabbed a rusted cleaver from the barn and hacked Bramble's carcass open right there in the yard. Bones, flesh, and steaming intestines were tossed into buckets. His wife Lorna tried to intervene, at least blindfold Rosie. "Ezra, she shouldn't have to watch this." But Ezra shoved her aside. "She's just a beast. She doesn't know grief." Rosie stood silently in her stall, blood on her snout. That night, Ezra boiled Bramble's offal into stew and roasted the head over cedar coals. A dozen men who had helped with the butchery feasted together. But later that night, just as the snow began to fall again, the mournful bellow of Rosie echoed across the valley, long, deep, and trembling. It wasn't a moo. It was more like a dirge. Half the town reported nightmares. By morning, Ezra McGrath was dead in his bed. His belly was grotesquely swollen, skin purple, and his face locked in agony. But Lorna, sleeping beside him, claimed she hadn't heard a thing. Rosie hadn't touched a bite of hay. She stood still in her stall, eyes fixed on nothing. No one dared meet her gaze. Ezra's only child, Nathan, had moved to Chicago with his wife and 3 kids. When he got the news, he wanted to return home for the funeral, but his wife's superstitious family forbade it. Your father died mysteriously, and your 4th child is nearly due. Don't bring bad luck here. 2 months later, the wind howled through Ridgefield again, and Rosie's haunting bellow returned. The next day a telegram arrived. Nathan's wife had gone into labor and died during childbirth. The baby didn't survive. Only Nathan and his 2 eldest remained. Lorna never recovered. She lit candles for her lost family, then locked herself in the bedroom. For days later, villagers scaled the back porch and found her hanging from the rafters, her face turned to the stall where Rosie still stood. Whispers swept through town. That ox is cursed, they said. She's a spirit now. A demon. Those who had eaten Bramble's flesh grew pale. Many fell ill. A few died within weeks. Accidents, infections, unexplained seizures. Ezra's nephew inherited the land. He refused to touch Rosie. Let her starve, he told the sheriff. But when he returned weeks later, the barn was empty. Rosie was gone. The stall door was still bolted. The iron nose ring lay on the ground, clean as if it had never been worn. For years, townsfolk said they could hear her cry on windless nights. And every time someone died within a day, they called it the death bell of Ridgefield. And it only fell silent when everyone involved in Bramble's death had passed. Whether the story's true or not, I only know one thing. I never eat beef. And I never look a cow in the eyes.